Welcome to our extended lunch and learn with Stefani Threet. We are back in the studio with her to talk a little bit about her early years and her background in ceramics. So I would like to introduce everyone to Stefani Threet of Threet Ceramics. She is Philadelphia based. She took her first class at Fleischer Art Memorial in clay, went on to study at Alfred University to earn her BA in ceramics, and she's the owner of Threet Ceramics in West Philly. Stefani says that her design concept began years and years ago as doodles on napkins and scraps of paper, and then later made their way onto fabric. For the past 12 years, that has been the landscape of her clay work. A lot of people say that her carvings onto clay look like so much work, but she says that it's a labor of love. Welcome, Stefani.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk a little bit and share a little bit about my work and my process.
We're excited to learn more. And you can see behind Stefani's shoulder, there are a few bottles on her shelf. And later in the program, you'll get to see more about her process and some finished works. Oh, there's one. Yay.
Yeah, so these are my medium bud bases.
And you can also see she's wearing one of her earrings. Stefani's earrings are very comfortable and beautiful and dramatic. They're not too heavy and they're perfect, I think. So I have 2 pairs. Anyway, so I wanted to start by asking you a little bit about your first experiences with clay and how you made the brave decision to go into the arts for your life. So maybe start with the early stuff and then where that took you.
So my first experience with clay, or the first time I remember touching clay, because I'm sure I've touched it or Play-Doh like much earlier in life. But my first experience was I took a class when I was about 5 years old at Fleischer Art Memorial. And we just did like pinch pots and like little figure people. And it's sort of like my mom's claim to fame for me, because she still has held on to some of those pieces that I made in the 5-year-old class, and she shows it to people to sort of show them how far I've come in my clay process, which is really funny. Yeah. But yeah, that was one of my first experiences. One of the great things is it was a community arts program that was offered, that offers like free art programs to the community, which was really great. For me at the time, because I grew up in a low income family, and that has been like really, having the access to those kinds of programs was really impactful in my earlier years of like sort of finding out what I was interested in. And then the next time I touched clay wasn't until high school. We had a pilot program that was part of our high school day. So I had enough credits to graduate early, but I wanted to stay with my class and graduate with my class. So I was offered this program with St. Joseph's University. It was a partnership that my school at the time, Overbrook High School, had with St. Joseph's University, where you could take classes, university level classes for part of the day, and do high school classes for part of the day. So the deal was you had to take at least one academic class each session, and then you got to take a class that was, you know, of your choosing. So I remember the first class I took was a mosaic class, and then I ended up taking a handbuilding class, which I just absolutely fell in love with. And at the time, I was doing an art magnet program at Overbrook, and we were doing a lot of drawing and painting, but we didn't have the facilities to work with clay. Mm-hmm. So it was just really great to have like be introduced to a new medium and be able to like sort of find my love for it that way. But I kind of knew that this was my passion and what I wanted to do when every night after the class was over, it was pretty much like you couldn't kick me out. Like I was the last person there until like, you know, we would just like, they would just try to kick me out. So I remember at the time, the professor, his name was Father McNally. I don't know if he's still at St. Joe's anymore. But what I really loved about him is he really did like help me sort of find my way with clay, and like encouraged a lot of experimentation and introduced me to a lot of like and a lot of the initial processes of how to work with clay. And then I kind of just like fell in love with it, and I told him that I wanted to go to college for ceramics, and he told me like some of the top schools to apply for in the country, and here I am.
Yeah, and you got into the top school in the country for clay, so that was pretty amazing. And
Yeah.
I know that you, I wanted to ask you, do you remember anything about his work? Did he ever show you his own artwork?
I think he was more of like into drawing and illustration. But I don't remember much about his work. But when we did the first recording, I kind of thought about like wanting to reach out with him and like kind of see where he is or what he's doing, because I think that would be like a really great a really great story.
Yeah, that would be so nice. I would love to hear if you can find him. That's great.
Yeah.
So then I know that you went on to Alfred, and that you also had some interactions with the Clay Studio pretty early on, right?
Yes. So I went to Alfred for my undergrad, and I kind of was working more on more sculptural work. And at that time in my life, I was working a lot more black and white and muted colors, or I'd say like more less colorful work I was creating at the time. And I just found, so at that time, I really just, and we were talking about this a little bit before, but I feel like thinking back on my Alfred experience, I feel like some people really thrive in like more specialized university settings. And I feel like for me, it definitely would have been beneficial for me to go to a smaller school and have gotten a lot more one-on-one attention, which for me, like I was very grateful to have the experience of going to Alfred, because it definitely is a very prestigious school, and we have professors that are world known and exhibit worldwide. But at the same time, I felt like I kind of got lost in, and I also was like dealing with a lot of culture shock when I was there, coming from a larger city and going to a small town. So I feel like for me, it would have been like I feel like now as an adult, I can say, knowing myself, that I would have thrived more at a smaller university setting.
Yeah, it sounds like you didn't, although it's nice that you always say that you appreciated being there, it's like, it doesn't sound like you were nurtured as well as maybe.
Yeah, I feel like I found myself, and this might be true for many people. I feel like I found myself after university. I did a really great work exchange program at Aramont School of Arts and Crafts in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And that's kind of where I found myself. I got to take a series of workshops with many different artists, including Sana Musasama and Margaret Bowles. And I took a printmaking class, which I was talking a little bit with someone recently about the crossover between printmaking and ceramics. And it seems like there's a lot of people that work in both mediums or are very attracted to both mediums. Yeah. I definitely feel like I'm attracted to both. So I worked with Linda Arbuckle a little bit, who is also a clay person and a textile person. And I also got to take some classes with Neil Patterson and I can't remember the last person that I took classes with, but I kind of was the work study student that just never left. I signed up for 5 weeks and then was like, how long can I stay? Can I keep staying? Can I keep staying? But that was sort of like a life-changing experience for me. I feel like I got to learn at my own pace and kind of choose what I wanted to learn. And you know, I kind of discovered many things during my time there.
And
that was over a decade ago.
That was a small town.
What'd you say? It's definitely a small town, but it's kind of interesting. I feel like when you're in a small town, but you're kind of just focused on doing something that you're really interested in, and that's your primary focus, it feels very different. and it feels like the room for discovery is very different. Whereas like when you're at university, you're not just taking ceramics classes because that's your favorite part of the day, but that's not a large majority of what your degree is about. Like it's art history, it's English classes, it's business classes, PE classes. So I felt like when I got to be at Aramont, it kind of gave me a little bit more time to sketch and to decide and plan. And yeah, so I got to find my way in a different way that way. And I noticed part of the question you asked me was a little bit about the clay studio. So
Sorry, I can't help it.
I realized as we talked about it, that I actually like the history sounds like a lot longer than it does in my head. But my first experience with the clay studio was when, I think it was the summer before my freshman year at Alfred. And a friend of mine, her mom had signed her up for this ceramics program. It was a program with the United Methodist Church. We were creating tiles on the history, which was like the Black history of the church. And basically, we were working with Leroy Johnson, who was a resident artist at the time. And I love Leroy. He's been a mentor to me from over the years. But we got to work on a kind of cool project together. And there was a group of boys that were working with me, and they were just not really interested in clay, and their parents had signed them up for the programs, and they didn't really want to be there. But it kind of gave me like a chance to have a one-on-one experience with Leroy, who is also another African-American ceramic artist and mixed media artist. And it just like, it gave me sort of like the backbone to see like what it looked like as what being a working artist looked like. And at that time, like I didn't really have like a clear sense of what that was. And it was nice to be able to meet Leroy and his colorful personality and learn a lot about what his life was like as a resident artist at the clay studio and kind of being a working artist.
Yeah.
And then after that, I came back when one of my breaks from Alfred, and I did a internship, and I was working in the gallery for a few months as an intern. And I did sort of like, like helped unload shipments and unpack things and organize things in the gallery space. And then I went on about a year or a year and a half later, I kind of had like a 6-month stint as the assistant gallery person in the clay studio. But yeah, and I also did a project with Isaiah Zagar, which started in the clay studio. I was working there as an intern, and I got to meet him, and he was working on the installation in the staircase of the clay studio, the mosaic installation. And I just was really fascinated on what he was working on, and just came up one day and he just like asked me if I wanted to help. And, I spent like weeks working with him in the hallway on that project. And then at the end, he asked if I wanted to work on with him on another project, and we ended up doing the basement of his home on South Street. So that was really fun and a really great experience.
Yeah, that's great. And do you think that spending time with Leroy and Isaiah, and I guess the artist who you worked with at Aramont, did it make it seem possible to you that you could make a life as an artist?
I don't think I quite knew at that point how to get to where they were. I think I was like missing some of the pieces at that point in my life. And a lot of it was financial, was like trying to figure out how to make it financially, like full-time as an artist, which I think, anyone that's a full-time artist went through that sort of struggle of trying to figure that out. But for me, it was sort of like a long journey to get here. I've always, before I started doing this full time, I had many jobs and always had many jobs, bartending, teaching ceramics, teaching drawing and painting, working for a cafe. I always had many jobs, and I was always had like a really good work ethic, but I always seemed to be able to keep my studio and make a priority, like being able to have my hands in clay in some way. Even if that meant I had to have another job to be able to do that. But I definitely, like, I feel like I worked really hard to get to where I am right now. And, you know, I'm really, really proud of how far I've come. And, you know, it feels really comfortable to talk about it. And I don't know, you had asked me before about like the idea of this being a straight, like if ceramics was like a straight line for me. And I don't think it's a straight line for most people. And I know a lot of people who are successful in clay, but they still don't get to do it full time. And I kind of made a choice that I wanted to do it full time in a way that I didn't have to focus so much of my attention on education. And I think for me, because I'm such a giving person emotionally, like that was really important for me to kind of like be able to just do clay full time and not have to focus on so much teaching, because I was teaching clay for quite a while.
Yeah, I think it's like earlier, I think I might have said that it's a brave decision to go into, to sort of go boldly into doing this full time. But it doesn't mean that it wasn't difficult to get to that point, or that it wasn't, as you're saying, like it's not a straight line. It's a journey for sure. I think for anyone in the arts, I think maybe people in art school don't always realize that you're not just going to be handed the artistic practice of your dreams when you graduate, but you get it if you work really hard, and you are very talented as you are. So now that you are the proud owner of Threet Ceramics, your company, and you're based in West Philly, and you are making full time. So I think that's. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience as a business owner? I think that might be helpful to young people who are sort of thinking about this in terms of like, how do you make decisions about how long it's going to take you to make a certain thing, how pricing, you know, what support systems did you have to get you to that point, if any?
I feel like I'm a work in progress. Like
as are we all.
Yeah. But I'm definitely a person that has always been very inquisitive and asked a lot of questions. So, you know, like I love going to craft shows that I kind of aspire to do, but don't really feel like I'm on the level to do yet. I love going to craft shows on their like less busy days. So like I won't go on a weekend, I'll go on a weekday if it's like a longer show, and just sort of talk to artists. And a lot of people are really open if you're very genuine about like in your intentions. And a lot of it is just sort of like, you know, it's not the question of like, how did you get what you have, or how did you get here? It's just sort of like, you know, well, what do I need to do to prepare? Like, what do you feel like you didn't like prepare enough for in order to get here? And it's interesting. People will really open up to you if they feel like the questions are very genuine. Mm-hmm. I'm also an over planner, which is like a good thing and a bad thing. So I feel like a lot of what I do is like, if I'm interested in doing a show, I might go to the show 2 or 3 years in a row before I actually apply. And that's just me feeling like I need to be prepared and I need to know what it entails, because I don't want to just like jump into something and have it be way, way more of a thing than I'm prepared for, or at a different level than where I am. And, you know, like I feel like kind of making those strategic decisions has worked out really well for me, and planning really has worked well for me. But for me right now, like, I feel like with the pandemic and everything changing, I feel like resilience is one of the biggest like things I can tell people is like effective, like being resilient. And what I mean by that is part of being a maker and having a business that's your own is that, things will, like, life will change, things will change. And if you can sort of move and mold yourself and reshape yourself along with that change, then, things will continue to look up for you. And you'll continue to improve and grow and, get better. But for me, I feel like I started out with coming out of university with not very much information about, what life after university. So I felt like I had really had a lot of experience working with atmospheric firing. And I didn't really think about where I was going to fire post school. And like a lot of my shift in the terms of me making was that I had like more access to electric kiln firings. But then, it quickly became like a thing where I kind of loved the work I was making in electric kilns. So, and I love the flexibility, and I love being able to work with really bright colored underglazes at lower temperatures, which I couldn't at the higher temperatures. So I feel like, figuring out, my suggestion would be like figuring out like what you're interested in and making sure that you have access to the resources. And initially, for me, like a lot of what paved the way for me were a lot of artists that opened themselves up to me, whether it was allowing me to rent space in their studio initially, or whether it was like allowing me to pay to fire work in their kilns because I didn't have my own equipment yet. But I feel like there's a lot of like small things that people let sort of get in the way of them continuing to make and to get started. But a lot of times if you just ask and you're genuine in your intentions, people are usually pretty open. And I sort of operate from the philosophy, and I didn't get this from anyone, but I sort of operate from the philosophy that I don't take no for an answer. And that's gotten me really far in life.
It sounds like general. Resilience, perseverance, and flexibility are the three things that you would.
I'm not super aggressive about it. I've learned to write emails in such a way where the language is very gracious, but at the same time, like I'm asking for something that I probably shouldn't be.
But if you don't ask, you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
It's true. That's so great.
I've applied to shows that I've really wanted to be in and didn't get juried in, but I've written a really thoughtful email, like I wait like until a week after they send out the notifications where everyone's sending the really nasty emails being angry that they didn't get in. And then I send a really nice email saying how much I really would love to be a part of the show. And then I send like some images of my work and talk about like how long I've been following the show or whatever. And surprisingly enough, I've gotten in more times than not. So I feel like, definitely perseverance.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and rolling with the punches. So those three words, I think that we'll pause our programming now. And if people hang on, they'll be able to see a little bit more of your process and hear about some of the other adventures you've had in Mexico and other places. So we'll sign off for now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And becoming happier, which was really interesting.
Yeah, that's great. It's a nice sense of, it gives you a chance to think about that place that makes you so happy too, even when you're not there.
Yeah.
To be working with those colors. Excellent. So do you want to talk a little bit? Oh, somebody asked a question about what your templates are made out of.
Oh, so this is actually just a blue like school grade cardstock that you would get like at CVS or Walgreens or whatever, school supplies for children. So usually what I do is I make like a batch of the same template, but the actual colored board basically is like really has like a sheen over it, like a little surface, so I can actually sponge these off and use them pretty frequently. Like this one's probably been used for a little over a year. But I usually make several of the same templates so that in case one of them gets a little bit disformed, or because I cut them all out with an X-Acto. If they get like a little bit disformed or dinged, then I still have like good ones that I can make more templates from. But, yeah.
Okay, that's a good point. So I have to make more than one. So it's a cardstock you buy that already has that blue on it.
Yeah, it already has the blue on it. I also have some that are like neon orange, but they're just like whatever color they happen to have at the CVS or whatever. I've been thinking about making them out of some sort of plastic material that kind of has like a little bit of a matte surface, so it won't stick so much to the clay. But I haven't figured out like what that is yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Right, because you want it to have the right thickness to have it be easy to use as a cutting out template, but you want it to be durable.
I want to not stick to the clay too much.
Yeah. I also want to point out that this is true across the board in all the crafts that I've ever studied. The artists and people in the field use the words, like you were saying, glazed over, and talking about being green. I just love it when people use like technical terms in their language about when they're talking about their feelings and how they.
Yeah.
Great. Do you want to show us a little bit more of the studio or any objects that you were thinking of showing off there?
Sure. So I can take you guys back to the wall. So these are some of my sgraffitoed medium vases. And then I have like a few coffee mugs here. And this guy is actually a planter. It gets, so it has 3 holes in it. I don't know if you guys can see that really well. Yep. And it gets 3 pieces of string, and it's a hanging planter. So it's inverted now because it's just resting on the shelf. And then I also have, these are other types of planters, and they have holes in the bottom for drain holes. And I've got like a couple of those here. You can see in the picture. Yeah. And here is my L&L kiln and my great sort of studio lighting.
And is your studio in a studio building with other?
Yes. I'm in a studio building on 42nd and Lancaster. It's actually like a reconstruction, and
so nice.
I don't know. Can you see?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lovely.
So and there's my slab roller. I don't know if you can see there.
Oh, Nancy Hayes just asked a question that I was also thinking about. She said, how did you decide on your signature? Like the fact that you sign everything with Threet and you have it in your, the font that you've chosen. And I don't know, I think that seems really great and bold and specific. So how'd you come to that?
I actually don't remember. That's a really good question, but I don't remember. I remember when I was working in black and white, I used to paint the entire exterior of my pieces black. And then like I'd want to sign my name. And I decided at that time that I wanted my business name to be Threet Ceramics, because Threet is my last name. And also because I thought it would be like kind of unique and people would ask a lot about it, which they do all the time. Yeah, I don't remember how it actually came about, but it definitely started when I was working in black and white and was just sort of carving through the black to sign my signature on the bottom.
Yeah. And I can't dump my coffee out, but I mean.
Yeah. So I used to put the years on all of my pieces. And then when I started working in wholesale about 3 years ago, one of the first buyers that came into my booth was like, I love your work, but could you possibly not put the date on the bottom of them? They want to be able to keep them around in the shop for a while and for people not to know it was a product that they purchased 3 years ago, which totally makes sense.
I guess
yeah.
As an artist, and I really like it when there's a date on something, but I guess from a retail perspective, I can understand that.
So Dominique just said, can you talk a little bit about your decision to wholesale and my journey with that? So so for a long time, I was just doing retail shows, retail craft shows. And at that point in time, I was just doing shows around Philly, New Jersey, Delaware. And I think at that time I'd maybe done one show in DC. But I felt like I was being carried in a lot of shops and stores here in Philadelphia, and I was participating in a lot of craft shows at that time. I think at that time I was doing almost 32 craft shows a year. It was really insane.
Oh my gosh.
But I, you know, at that point in time, I thought that was like what I needed to do to make the kind of income that I wanted to make and to not have to do anything else other than make. And those were like in my first 2 years of doing this full time. And I'm now into a little over 4, almost 5 years of doing this full time. And yeah, I was doing a craft show and it just got completely rained out, but the organizers wouldn't. It was a 3-day show and the organizers wouldn't let us go. And we just had to like sit there in the rain. And so we were just like sitting there, and there's a group of us sitting in my tent, like just chatting and everything. And one of my neighbors was like, you know, like, forget this, I'm going to go wholesale. Like, I don't want to be sitting here in the rain and having organizers tell us that we can't go home. And so like I went home and I thought about it, and like wholesale is definitely a whole other different animal. And I feel like it's always a learning process, learning what you can make to wholesale, learning what is worth your time and your money to wholesale, and also like trying to provide people with nice quality items that they can sell and feel good, and you know, you feel good about putting out into the world. So I definitely I started out with way too many items being offered for wholesale, but it sort of came out of that experience of just having too many rained out shows and seeing the effects of climate change on the craft show industry. And the idea that you pay for a show, and whether the weather is good or not, like you still have to pay for that show. And if the weather's not great and the show is completely rained out, or there's like a dangerous storm and you can't go, like you still had to pay for that show, and you know, you don't get to make any income from that. So it really just came out of those experiences. And I had like kind of like a 2-year run of a lot of rained out or stormed out outdoor craft shows. And so I had signed up for the time for what was Acre, which is now American Handcrafted. And I signed up for their emerging artist program, which was for people who were new to wholesale, not necessarily new artists, but new to wholesale. And it was like a really great experience. They gave you like a sort of already put together kit for a booth. So it came with lighting and tables and everything. So it was like a nice deal and a nice introduction to wholesale. But at the same time, I got reached out to them by their partner company, which was New York Now, about signing up for what they were calling like their emerging artist program. But their emerging artist program was a 16 by 16 inch pedestal that you could put your work on top of.
Oh my gosh.
And the first question I asked the organizer was, what would a potter do with 16 inches of space? Like, there's no way. And it was almost as much money as like a small booth there.
Oh my gosh.
So I kind of laughed and she laughed, and it ended up being like a pleasant laugh that we had. And she offered me like the smallest booth option there. And so what started out as what I was going to be like getting my feet wet in wholesale, kind of just ended up me just sort of jumping in all the way. And that was kind of a crazy year, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the business side of working with wholesale and how to sort of tailor your business to be able to do that and juggle, because I was also doing retail shows, but a whole lot less like a small fraction of what I was doing before.
Mm-hmm.
But it also gave me like the stability to be able to know that I had incoming income, and also to be able to spend more time in my studio and focus more on my studio practice.
Yeah.
And the goal, which I haven't quite gotten to yet, it's still a work in progress, is for the more commercial work that I make for wholesale to be like a part-time job, and for me to be able to work on making more larger gallery pieces, which has been a goal for a while. And it's a goal that I haven't really made much time for, but I really enjoyed the time of my life when I was able to make a lot more larger works. Yeah.
That perfectly segues into a question I had in my back pocket, which is, if you had unlimited resources and time to make, it sounds like you do have an idea of what that would mean. Like,
yeah, I love working on larger pieces. So these are my medium-sized vessels, but I love working larger than this. And I also used to make these really large story platters, which were like about 36 inches wide. And those were really pieces that I got to like spend the time and put more energy into. And, that's really what I would love to do.
Yeah, so let the wholesale kind of fund the more experimental, larger pieces.
Yeah. So now I'm doing a bit less wholesale, and I sort of like many artists had to pivot a lot during the pandemic. And since like a lot of my retail stores are not open, I just sort of pivoted a lot of my business to the internet, mostly generating most of my sales now from Instagram, which was something that was a completely uncomfortable transition for me, because I can be present on social media, but I like to be present and then not present. And part of like generating sales and stuff on social media means that you have to be present, very present.
Yeah.
Someone asked me, how do I handle shipping?
Very
horribly. So I've had like a huge influx of orders over the last 2 weeks, and it's sort of more sales for me than Christmas. And I am learning how to make the transition a bit more effective. But I spent all of yesterday packing orders, and I'd like to at some point like hire a person that can do that. And it's kind of hard with the situation we're in right now with COVID to do that, because I've definitely had times where I've had assistants work with me, either in like rolling my slabs and cutting the initial forms, but like right now I kind of need someone to help a lot with shipping, and it's, I'm not really comfortable having someone in my house, so that's kind of a hard thing to do. Someone says shipping large wholesale orders. I can't see the second part of the question.
Is shipping charge part of the price of the wholesale order? Like, do you?
The customer pays for shipping. Yeah, the customer pays for shipping. So I set my prices on my pieces, which is usually, this is industry standard, is 50% of the initial cost of the piece, or the retail cost of the piece. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the customer pays shipping.
And so I mean, I love the fact that you already have that plan in place for what that larger work is, and how to kind of take that next step. But I think even before switching to wholesale, just that decision to be full-time artist is a really brave one, and one that takes a lot of faith and passion. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I kind of got like forcefully pushed into it. I was working full-time for the Mural Arts program. I started working for them as an arts administrator. And then I went on to work for them as an art educator. And it was kind of interesting. The shift happened mostly because of the full-time benefits that came along with being one of their teaching artists. And I did that for about 3 years. And then I was laid off because the funding for 2 of my programs got cut. So it just basically put me in a place where, because I got laid off, I could get 6 months of unemployment while I kind of put together a plan for what the next step was for Threet. And that just sort of gave me the time and, the money to propel myself into my business. So I like to say, like, it was like a happy force. Like, it was definitely something I needed to do. And I'm glad that, I was able to do that and like turn this, like, what at the time was kind of devastating experience into something really positive, and a life change for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Never waste a crisis. That's what I'm trying to remember these days. So I think that it also shines a light, all the things you've told us shines a light on how a life in the arts is not a straight line. You go into, you have a passion, you go decide, even the fact that you got to, you studied ceramics, it still wasn't a straight line from Alfred to being a full-time studio potter, right? You had other jobs, and you sort of made connections in other ways and found all these other inspirations. And then again, we're brave enough to kind of come back to that original thing. But I think it's important for younger people to know that if you get out of school and you don't immediately make it as a full-time artist, there's nothing wrong with that. We're sort of all.
No, I definitely didn't travel this straight line to doing this full time. Like, I'm definitely like a story of I worked really hard. There were times where I had 3 different jobs. I was bartending, I was waitressing, I was running a cafe, I was teaching ceramics. I've taught at many different cultural arts centers here in Philadelphia. And, I did it part-time for a long time, a very, very long time. And it's kind of hard, and I know this for many people, to take that initial step and to know, if making the leap is going to be a successful one. And it definitely didn't start out successful. Even with the full-time journey, it was a lot of learning curves. And I feel like it still is a lot of learning curves, and just sort of figuring out what works and what doesn't. And when something isn't working, trying to figure out what your next plan of action is. And that's been a big force for me. My mom always says, don't just have your plan A and B, have your plan C, D, E, and F. So she's always just be prepared that, if whenever the bottom falls out, you still have a place to land. So, yeah.
That's really good advice. I think we have a couple of other questions that we can answer. We have about 5 more minutes. Michelle asks, how often do you make a change in the pattern design on your pieces?
So I have the concentric circle pattern is really common in my work. So you can see it on the mug. You can also see it on this piece here. I have many different variations of my pattern making, in terms of how I combine patterns together on a piece. So this one has a sgraffito, and then it has the sun design on it. I like to do a lot of it really just sort of free form, where I just sort of I paint a piece, I get 2 or 3 colors that inspire me and put some designs on there as the base underglaze colors. And then I just sort of see what comes to me or what I feel from the piece. And that's how I really enjoy making, is I enjoy sort of not having a plan. But I definitely, with the transition to wholesale, I had to come up with some products that I could, and designs that I really liked making, so that I can consistently make them over and over again. But yeah, from the, when I'm just in my studio and I'm just making work, really free form for myself, I just kind of like to see where things take me. And usually the colors are inspired a lot by my mood and the design work as well. I'm having like a really funky day, you might see some really crazy stuff happening on the surfaces.
Well, and that's something we didn't talk about either, is like we talked about color inspiration, but the mood of the shapes and whether the shapes have, again, kind of specific meanings. But this is all freehand,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's really amazing. For those of you who haven't seen it in person, it's just how skilled Stefani's handwork is. It's
yeah, I feel like at this point I've been drawing circles forever.
it's hard. Circles are like the hardest thing to draw well, evenly. So, and I find it very meditative as an object to use and to think about. Is that something that you try to, is that something you're thinking about when you're making the forms, the shapes?
I kind of get, like, in all honesty, I really get lost in the design work. It's my most favorite part of the process. And usually I'm like, I kind of go back and forth between two different ways that or like moods that I'm setting for myself when I'm making or doing this graffito. I'm usually in complete silence and just sort of like zone out and get kind of lost in the design work and the pattern making, which is like the most enjoyable part for me. Or I'm like playing some kind of weird, funky music, and I just kind of see where the designs and the line work take me.
That's good. It's nice to be able to picture you kind of in the zone there. All right, we have a couple more questions. How high do you fire your work, and how many pieces do you lose to warping? Those can go hand in hand, then we'll ask the next one.
Okay, so I fired a cone 6, which is a little bit over 2,250 degrees, and that's Fahrenheit for those people that are Celsius. And then you said, what do I do to combat warping?
Or how much do you lose? And yes,
how much do I lose to warping? So I actually don't have a ton of loss. I work in phases, which any hand builder will tell you is the only way you can hand build. So I cut my templates out. I actually work on drywall for drying my clay after I've cut the pieces and have them on templates. So I let them sit on the drywall for a bit, and then I sort of put them into the shape that they're going to be without slipping and scoring yet. And I leave them at that stage for a little bit out in the air or covered overnight. And then like I come back and I slip and score that piece together the next day. And usually when I'm slipping and scoring, the piece is like, the clay is not floppy at all. It's got some form and some depth to it. So yeah, I guess that's the answer.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, again, with wholesale and standardizing your process, the idea is to weed out the loss that you might get with like, if it's very standard.
Yeah, I do get some warping, but I mean, like, I feel like the percentage is really fractional. Yeah.
Cool. And then Becky asks, at what stage do you sgraffito your work? Leather hard, bone dry, etc.
I sgraffito at leather hard. It's sort of a dry leather hard.
And then Sana asked a question. Can you unmute yourself, maybe, Sana? Not sure if I understand your question.
Yes, my question was, listening to her journey, which is so wonderful and refreshing, is it's not hard for us to be introspective as artists and peek into another artist's life and make little teeny comparisons to tweak your own. I'm probably 3 times your age. I don't even know I know right now, but I'm just wondering about stopping and starting again. Many conversations I've had with my students as young people who want to be artists, I tell them that there'll be periods in their life when they will stop working, but it doesn't mean that they quit. It means that they stop. So I'm asking you about your starting, your restarting again, that's all.
That's
my restarting.
Lovely to think of it. Thank you, Sana.
So I feel like I was in Oaxaca over the first 3 months or the first 2 months of COVID, and I'm not sure if I'm answering this question correctly, Sana, but
sure.
The first month and a half I was there, I kind of struggled to find a studio space to work in. Like, I knew kind of a week into the trip that I either needed to stay or I needed to go. And I made the choice to stay because there wasn't going to be a way for me to get back to the US during that time. So I made the choice to stay. And it was a conscious choice, but I didn't really know what my studio life would look like. And I spent the first month and a half like trying to find a studio and trying to find someone that would fire my work, because even sometimes, like as an American or an outsider, people sometimes can be kind of skeptical about allowing you into their spaces. So it was like, you know, I went through a journey of doing that, and I met lots of really great people along the way, but most of them were wood firing or were pit firing and doing other types of work other than the kind of work that I wanted to make with clay. So I felt like I definitely was, when I was there, I was at a stopping point. And I had to use that time, I think, to just be a little bit reflective and to do a lot of sketching. So I did a lot of sketching during that time. And I just did a lot of planning for future when I could have my hands back in clay. But I've also definitely been in times where I didn't have a studio, or I didn't have a studio to work in for financial reasons or for access reasons. And I feel like I usually just go back to drawing. And that's what I do during that time period, and planning and designing. And but yeah, it definitely was hard, I think, this time around, because I've been working with clay really full on for a couple of years now. So like having those like month and a half when I first arrived in Oaxaca this time was really hard, because I was just so used to just being able to go to my studio whenever I wanted. And yeah, it's not always a possibility.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for
And
that.
I just wanted to say, Sana, if you never knew this, you were the one that inspired my travel. Hearing your stories about your journeys and, you know, where you've been and what you did. And you told the story at Aramont about traveling alone as a woman, and like how to pay attention to your surroundings and how to also just follow your instincts. And that was really impactful for me, because for a long time I wanted to travel, but I didn't think I could travel alone as a woman. And yeah, that was sort of what started the way for me.
Come to Cambodia with me one day.
I will. I remember the first time you invited me, I was in Oaxaca and I couldn't afford to go, but I would like to make it happen.
Do it.
All right, you heard it here first, everybody. Thank you, Sana, for that beautiful question. And I think that we can wrap up. There's one more comment from Kel B. Sana, what a beautiful question. Just keeping a kind of faith, a sense of continuity across a parent stopping can be so hard, but so important. Really appreciate Stephanie's response too. Thanks for this one. Kel often joins us and makes really nice comments, so thank you for that.
Oh, no, thank you.
Okay, Stephanie, do you have any thoughts that you want to leave us with?
No, I just wanted to thank you so much for hosting this, and I'm really grateful for like us getting to know each other over the past like week, 2 weeks, just through conversation. And I'm really excited about the future and, you know, some of the things that are upcoming with the clay studio. So yeah. Well,
thank you. I really feel the same way. I'm really honored that we've gotten a chance to know each other, and then I've gotten a chance to know you, and we can continue. And maybe if you get back to Mexico, I'm going to come visit you in Oaxaca.
Yeah, I'm there often.
I'm going too. She's
yeah, I'm trying. I didn't talk about this at all, but I'm trying to start making a part-time like that be my part-time residence. And so I'm trying to figure out how to make that happen. And part of that is going to be trying to figure out how to get a kiln there. So
make people pay to come do residencies, and like, yeah. All right, we'll talk about that later. Thank you for everything. It's been lovely. Thank you to all of you who joined us. We had 42 people on the call today.
Oh,
Amazing.
wow.
Great to see everybody's face. And this will be recording of most of it, because I always forget to hit record right away, but most of it's recorded and will be available on the website in a few days. And we hope all of you will join us next week to hear Adam Chow talk about his upcoming exhibition. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.